Hello, good morning and welcome to Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, as you know, we put Ghana first. The use of regulatory mechanisms to restrict media freedoms can take a number of forms. Official control over the regulatory process can be built into the legal framework from the outset through either restrictive licensing laws or the processes for appointing the leadership of a regulatory body. However, even in countries with a relatively well-constructed legal framework, the laws can be selectively applied or misused to close critical outlets, and political leaders can exert informal extralegal influence over nominally independent regulators. To regulate or not to regulate, the fine line between censorship and the freedoms that the press or the media enjoy. We will deal with this exhaustively this morning. The president has appointed some 39 deputy ministerial nominees, nominated them. We'll find out what they bring to the table. And the NDC appears to be in a reorganization fix. Is that really the case? And what does it seek to gain? And for how long is it going to snub the Electoral Commission as the Commission invites it to a meeting for a review of the elections and it outrightly rejects that invitation? We'll be right back to deal with the vexed matters. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile, it's your most authoritative news analysis platform. I'm Samson Ladi Anyenini. And let me begin briefly with my take, and I title it, Bail is Not Paid. This is a subject I have dealt with on a number of occasions, but at the invitation of many of you to explain the question of bail and the misrepresentation that a certain amount of money is required to pay for bail, I do this and do it very briefly. And so, Ohenire Griftiante, this is your request. The brief explanation that has to be given is that the law is that bail is not supposed to be used as punishment. You may have heard me say that many times. Some time ago, until our own good friend Martin Pebu went to the Supreme Court, there were matters for which you could not be granted bail if you're accused of them and arraigned for them, like murder and a host of them, including the drugs, narcotics, rape, defilement, hijacking, piracy. You could not be admitted to bail because the law specifically says so. But Martin Pebu went to the Supreme Court and the court said, struck that provision of the law down, meaning every matter is liable to bail. The constitutional provision is that everyone is innocent until you have admitted to your guilt, or you have been so pronounced guilty, not by a media house, but by a court. Not a court in some bush, as in some ritualist doing his thing, but a court of competent jurisdiction. So when you appear before a court, you either say, I am guilty, or you say, I am not guilty. Once you say you are guilty, then you can be pronounced or sentenced, convicted and sentenced on your own guilty plea. Otherwise, you go through a whole trial, you defend yourself, produce your evidence and so on, get to the end, and then the court will now make a determination whether you are guilty or you are not. Now, there are many people who have sent me messages and spoken about their ordeal having been to a police station, and police officers allegedly have asked them to bring an amount of money for their bail. When you go to the police station yourself, you will see that sometimes there are inscriptions at the police station that don't pay for bail. So why do you go and pay for bail? Have you ever received any receipt for the money you pay for bail? So let me tell you this. If you ever paid an amount of money for bail, you paid it into the pocket of a police officer or whichever officer at the court's area has told you that you need to bring money. Bail is not paid. Now, somebody has been granted bail of 80,000 Ghana cedis, and people are saying the celebrities who have supported her have not been able to raise that money. No, they don't need to raise any money. Once the court said the bail is with surety to be justified, all she needed was a landed property or something of the sort, document to show that she has this, or the surety will show that they have this and can use it to secure the bail. So in the instance that the person runs away or escapes, then you will be called upon to forfeit what you use as the guarantee for the bail. If you use a land, if you use your house, you'll be called upon to forfeit it because you use that to guarantee. So once again, let me end it here. Never pay to anybody. And if anybody tells you that you must pay money for bail, tell them they are lying. There's no law that requires you to pay money upfront for any bail. And bail is available even after you have been convicted by a court. Once you file an appeal, your freedom may be given until the appeal is determined. Thank you very much. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news on our platform. And my guest to do this discussion this morning, Kojo Opon Nkrumah, who is the MP of Fuase, Ayurebi, and Minister for Information, will join us for the second segment. We are doing the first segment regarding the politics of the nominees and also the NDC's reorganization and a decision to, as it were, snub the Electoral Commission when he invited over a review of the election 2020. So Kojo Opon Nkrumah will join us after that first segment because the broadcasting bill that is being considered is something that, if you can say, he is the one sort of sponsoring it. His ministry is the one responsible for it. Alhassan S. Suhini is MP Tamale North and member Appointments Committee. He stays with us for the politics and also to the question of media regulation because he has sufficient experience in that area. Thank you very much for joining us. Also here is Gary Nima-Komafo, member Legal and Constitutional Committee of the New Patriotic Party. Gary, thanks for making the time.
Thank you.
Gary will be with us for the first segment of the political discussion. Suleimana Brahima is Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa. If you like, the biggest media watch think tank within the sub-region, to help us to deal with the broadcasting bill and the other issues. Also, Professor Kofi Abochi is Dean of the UPSA Law School. He'll also be with us from start to the end. Gentlemen, joining us by Zoom, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Samson.
Okay, may I hear, Mr. Abochi, if you are clear in sound? Thank you very much.
Yes, I apologize, I was muted. Yes, thank you, Samson, for inviting me.
Right, great. So if you may, Let me start with the two of you on the issue of the politics, which the first one we'll deal with very briefly. What excites you about the deputy ministerial list? Start with you, Suleimana.
Well, thank you very much. I think the first thing I would want to talk about were a number of elements. The first being that I was pleased to see a number of folks that I would describe as youthful on the list. So, for example, you have someone like Mavis Nkansambwedu, who is the MP for Afija Kwabre East, nominated for Roads and Highways, who is just 31 years old. You have someone like Fatih Abubakar, who is nominated to be the deputy for Honorable Kojo Nkrumah, who is just 34. You have somebody like Frederick Obey Amankwa for Upper West Achin, who is nominated for transport, and he is just 37. Then you have others who are in their 40s. So, for example, Ochribefi for trade is about 45. You have Thomas Mbomba for foreign affairs, who is also 45. Then you have people like Ejimeza Kosa, Techima North, who is about 43. So it's heartwarming to see that quite a number of the nominees and potential deputy ministers are persons that are quite youthful. And we can only look forward to the energy and the exuberance that they bring to their respective positions.
One of the deputies for the Attorney General Department.
Sorry?
One of the deputies for the Attorney General, Dana Sonaba Dapa, belongs to the earlier brackets of youth that you were talking about. I suspect you just are not familiar with that.
That certainly adds to the numbers. And I believe that if we were to go through all the 39, we may even find quite a number who would be within 45 downwards. So that's quite exciting.
Okay.
The other thing is regional balance. When the substantive ministers were announced, a region like Upper East and the OT region were not featured. I should say there was no sector minister named from any of these two regions, apart from regional ministers. And I remember when I mentioned it, someone saying that, well, but every region has a regional minister. And so what we're talking about is the sector ministers. This time around, Upper East has, I think, two people, Honorable Abdullah Abanga, who is a very fantastic politician, and the only person to have won a seat in the Upper East region, representing the Binduri constituency, is named, and also Kojo's potential deputy, Fatih Abubakar, is also from the Upper East region. And I have read that Herbert Krapa, who is nominated to be deputy for trade, is from the OT region. So you see quite a spread there. And then regions like Savannah has the MP for Daboya Makarigo, who is, a new entrant, and that's the first time the MPP has won that seat, being nominated for, I think, the Agric Ministry or so, and somebody from Tatali Sambuli also for the Foreign Affairs Ministry. So I think the regional spread this time around is also another thing that is quite exciting. I'm quite pleased with the nominations for energy, for example, because that's a major sector, and at a time when we are dealing with potential doomsday and so on, to have Mohammed Amin Adam, who is an energy expert, has PhD in a field related to energy, and then both Ureku and Ejapa Mesa are lawyers, and I believe that our oil sector has a lot of things to do with contracts and so on and so forth. So that's a fine balance. I am told that someone like Napo is a go-getter. He's somebody who is a doer. So if you have him as a minister and then you have an energy expert as deputy and then you have two lawyers to back him up, I think that's quite a good arrangement. I'm quite disturbed or not too happy with health, for example, where you have the substantive minister who doesn't have a health background, and the 2 deputies who have been nominated do not also have health background. And I would have thought that at a time when we are dealing with COVID and how we come out of it and so on and so forth, it would have been great to have somebody who has expertise in health policy, who comes from within the field. And I think it wasn't surprising during the peak of the COVID crisis, the president brought on someone like Okoboy, for example, who is a medical doctor and therefore should understand some of the dynamics within the field and understand the practitioners and whatever challenges they may be going through. But that's a sector, as I said, very critical at this stage. But the nominees to deputize Kwaku Agyeman-Manu are folks who both don't have background in health matters. Other than that, I think, as I mentioned, someone like Abanga to deputize Asenso Boakye is a great pair. I know Abanga quite well. He is, as I said, a fantastic politician. And I was not surprised that he was able to snatch that seat from the NDC, even with very limited resources. I may say that he didn't even have the resources to campaign, but being a tactical politician, he was able to win that. And the MPP happens to have only that seat from the Upper East region. The Deputy Information Minister, not an MP, fairly young, 34 years, has worked with the president when he wasn't president, working at the president's office, became the Deputy Director of Communications at the presidency, and recently was one of the spokespersons for the MPP in the Supreme Court election petition. I believe that he's gone through the mill and hopefully would be able to support Kojo to handle the difficult challenges in managing the information ministry. And at a time when, as you have indicated, we'll be talking about the broadcasting regime and all of that. So these will be my initial comments about the nominations. Samson.
Right. Okay. Professor Bochi, what do you say? And then after if you like, your initial analysis generally of them, you may also zoom into the area of your interests. I'm sure that will be the Attorney General's department, and tell us what you know about these candidates, the 2 of them nominees, Tiayabwa and also Dana Sunabadapa, and what you think they are likely to bring. I know some of them have been your students.
Yes, that's right, Samson. I'll come to that. So just as you indicated, and I think that Suleimana has done a good job with the details, so I'm probably going to stick to the general. I think that, again, it's clear that the major feature of these appointments lies in the youthfulness and dynamism of the persons who have been nominated. It is clear that the average age, it seems, is in the region of the 30s and probably early 40s. And so there's a certain conscious attempt at infusing youthful dynamism, at infusing energy into the government, into the governance space. It's imperative for us to understand this, because the reality is that our country as a whole has a population which is youthful. Overall, our population balances on the side of youth as opposed to the aged. And therefore, our leadership must reflect that. And I think the president has done a good job in nominating people who reflect the demographic quality of our country. And so that is important and worthy of note. I think there's also an attempt to really reflect the regional balance, even though I have to say that presidents often face this difficulty. And my interpretation of the constitutional requirement of regional balance is one that charges the president to, as much as possible, reflect that. Therefore, presidents and our leaders usually trying to meet the requirement, in many ways, is actually a reflection of the real politic dynamic of things more than the legal, because the legal requirement is not hard and fast. If you find people who are competent, so be it. You have to try and, as much as possible, appoint people to reflect the regional distribution of things. But there is no requirement that you have to, of necessity, appoint from a certain part of the country, even if some other people are better qualified and they are not from that part of the country. Nonetheless, as I indicated, these are political realities, and it's imperative that different constituencies feel represented in the government. And I think there was an attempt to achieve that. Again, as Suleimana indicated, this appears to have been substantially met as far as these appointments are concerned. So again, that's a feather in the arm. feather in the cap, of the president. Now, one of the things that is important as a feature of these appointments lies in the fact that it's important for us to remember that the government has tried to reduce the size of the government. One of the major criticisms, and indeed one of the major issues of the campaign in the last election, was the size of government. And the different political parties, as it were, promised that they were going to try and operate leaner government. So there's been an attempt to reduce government. And whenever you attempt to reduce the size of government, what you do is to do a concentrated competence, a concentrated arrangement of competence, so to speak. In other words, you probably have to have one person who must have a certain skill, dexterity to be able to perform across sectors. If you are concentrating ministries, if you are concentrating government agencies that otherwise were formally split. So that concentration also appears to be reflected in these appointments, given some of the people who have been appointed this time round and the kinds of dynamic variables that may have been considered in these appointments. Now, in appointing deputy ministers, one needs to focus on certain key and fundamental indicia. One of them is the fact that a deputy minister, in many ways, is a stand-in minister in the absence of the minister himself. So the minister himself may not be able to perform ill health or being out of the country. The deputy minister stands in. While the minister is in town and is able to perform his function, but is not able to be everywhere, the deputy minister represents the minister when the minister is not able to, so to speak, show up in places that he's supposed to. So it is in this context that the deputy minister must have that feature, that competence, and the various dynamics that would be reflected in a minister, for example. And so if you are appointing a deputy minister, you're essentially looking at a copy replacement of the minister in the absence of the minister being able to show up when he has to show up and perform the functions for which is appointed. But critically, it's supposed to provide support for the they have to.
Okay, we have just a hello, Professor Bochi. Okay, so I think we have just a little problem with his line. We'll establish contacts again with him so that he can complete his submissions and zero in on the area of his practice, the law. That is to say, the Attorney General's department. Gary, well, first of all, there are those who say the president ought to be applauded for first reducing the ministries and then reducing the number of the ministers. Well, I disagree with anybody who says he deserves any praise because he brought it upon himself. He didn't need 100 and over a dozen, ministers in the first place, even though that was justified over the period. But with what has happened so far, let's hear you.
Well, good morning, Samson, and good morning to my brother Suhini and your fellow panelists and your viewers. I think that what we need to focus on now, by and large, is what we have now. 86 in total, I believe, which is a departure from 127. So I think that we should commend the president because, you see, with the reduction of size of government, clearly there's a correlation on the exchequer. Mm-hmm. Clearly, I mean, because if you look at even at those who have been appointed now, about 34 of them are MPs already. 34 are MPs already, which simply means that the salary they are going to draw, will not be the salary as if they are not even ministers or members of parliament. So there will be a reduction in government, in public purse expenditure. Now, if you also look at the youthfulness, as I rightly pointed out, the fact that now there's a blend of youthfulness and those who are old, those who are already on the job, who have had experience for the past 4 years, and the new ones have been brought on board to come and complement what is going on. I think it's better. Look at somebody like Abu Jinapo, Honorable Abu Jinapo, and how he has started with the Ministry of Lands and Forestry. Right. Clearly, the way he has started, I have been sitting back and watching him from the flanks. You can see that he means business. Now, Galamsey is an area that His Excellency the President put his presidency on the line. In the first, what do you call it, term. And then told Ghanaians that, look, I'm going to make sure that our water bodies is sanitized. What did we see? Along the line, we saw there was a lot of problems along the line. People were flouting all these orders. Now we see a new minister who has come on board. The first thing that he did was to now invite stakeholders for a full-blown conference to see how we can make progress. Now there's a suspension of even prospecting license. People take that license with the thinking that, oh, they are going to do prospecting. And they end up actually going to what? To go into the forest to go and even do Galamsey by itself. So now I think that when you have all these people now on board, let's see how it goes.
As much as that's such a good signal, and everybody, who is fair-minded should support the minister to achieve this.
Right.
Questions are really being asked, and because you spoke of the president putting his presidency on the line, and I'm sure people are justifying that, but there is also the argument that suggests that you cannot actually say so, because even as yesterday, the president is saying the same things he said at the start of his first tenure about Galamsey. And we know that within the period when Galamsey was said to have been banned completely, there was a ban until certain things had happened. The report we had was that the gold exports from Galamsey, we had the highest within that year. You can't explain that. You can only come to the irresistible conclusion that that promise was a failure.
You see something? Yes.
If he started this way, there is actually no guarantee that it will end in success. But that will be our prayer and hope.
See something? Let's understand this. The issue of Galamsey is not a fight for one person. Let's not forget that we are being told that there are big politicians, opinion leaders, chiefs, or whatnot, all involved in that kind of menace. Look, you go to those areas where these things are being done, and you see how endemic and how serious these things are going on. Look at, I'm part of into the late Major Muhammad and how he died. Unfortunately, the community itself, people think that the land belongs to them, and they must, at all costs, be involved in that kind of trade. Some are not even willing to even go for ordinary livelihood because they believe that they are entitled as a right to do the Galamsey. And you see, one thing I've realized is that when people are used to a certain way of life, making them to depart from that way of life is very difficult. Because, for instance, he's born in a mining community. All that probably he knows that is mining. He's born in a fishing community. All that he knows is fishing. Now you are telling him that no, you must now be engaged in responsible mining. What you are doing rather is irresponsible mining. He doesn't want to understand.
Yeah.
You see, they go to the water bodies, they destroy the water bodies, all in the hope of trying to get gold, fine money.
So you mentioned big politicians involved.
That's what we are told.
We know. We're beyond being told. We know that that's what is going on. And what that simply means is the solutions that people have talked over and again. Like Kofi Bento says, if the president gives you responsibility for a particular district, if we find that it is going on there, you lose your job. It's as simple as that. So that tells you there's a failure of leadership. Because if these big people are the ones doing it, and they are the reasons it is still going on, then it means the political leadership has failed.
Well, not this one. I think that basically now we are in the second round two. The round two with the people who have now been appointed now, the youthfulness, you can see dynamism, you can see action. Right. Let's see how it goes. Okay. I can assure you that with the way that they have started, it's not going to be an ideal wonder. With the way that they have started, I can assure you that the deputy ministers are going to promote the work of their ministers, and by and large, by the time that this round two will be over, Ghanaians will see that the 2024 election for the next MPP administration will not be an ideal wonder because they will have seen a clear signal on the ground that, as a matter of fact, the president has succeeded.
Okay.
You understand? So please, let us see just how it goes. Now, Attorney General, Minister of Justice, the two deputies who have come there, they should understand that there's a very huge job area there. You know, we have seen attorney generals in this country. They should learn from the deputy attorney general then, who has not been elevated to attorney general. Something you and I were in court all the time, and at least you can monitor the work that Honorable Dame did at the time of deputy attorney general.
Dame and Pemka.
And Pemka, yes. You see, as they are coming there, they are not MPs, okay? They are not MPs. So the understanding I have is that they have to dedicate all their time, all their work, all their energies into being in the office and going to court. We want to see them in court. We want to see them in court. We want to see them leading government charge every time and not come to tell us, oh, case adjourned, and when you go to court, the attorney general should be in court. They say they are not in court. A lot of work is there, so they must be able to go there.
So is it really a question of supervision of the people under them, or they, you know,
they must lead the charge? They have to lead the charge. You see, if you see, let me tell you something. The time that Aikotu was an attorney general, that for that brief period, he used to tell me, he said, look, I was making sure that certain things I would do it myself. When the leader is doing the thing himself, it has a reflect effect on the people who are there. Assuming the attorney general or the attorney generals are supposed to be in court, or they give direction and you don't do the direction, they will deal with you in the office. And therefore, I expect them to lead the charge in the office and make sure that government business in the attorney general's office is pushed in court.
Right.
But sometimes it's very, very frustrating that you are doing a case with them and they don't appear to want to come to court.
Yeah. There's this thing about attorney generals who are politicians and therefore are unable to prosecute members of the party. In this group, we have one of them who is not known to be involved in politics, Asuna Badapa. But they respond to the head. Does that solve the problem?
Something you want to fix me this morning. You know that, yes, we all understand that there are some cases that if it involves the political echelons in the same political party, and Suhini will agree with me that when they were in government, you see his people, they would line up to go and sign the petitions for release of some persons who were convicted for some offense. You see, sometimes the difficulty that you find...
It was not illegal, by the way.
That you find is that something, I sit in the same cabinet with you, I sit in the same party with you, and sometimes it becomes quite difficult. They say, well, looking at your face and going to prosecute you. It's a natural challenge. It's a natural challenge. And that is why, essentially, the president, in his wisdom, they created office of special prosecutor. That this one will come over. When he comes in, his duty basically will be to, go after everybody. Whether you are in a political party, whether you're not in a political party, whether you're in the NDC, MPP, whatever you are, go after everybody. You see, so that, so to speak, political connotation of finding a difficulty in chasing your own people. But for instance, assuming me and you are ministers and I chase you in court, how do I see the cabinet with you? How do I see the same party with you? It's a natural challenge.
The NDC can boast that during its time, one of its own, Abuga Pele, and another gentleman, Philip Asevich Apene, who is a bigger guy in the party in the Upper East region, were all prosecuted. They are serving their jail sentences.
Something that case, technically, some people were made as sacrificial lambs. Okay. Wow. As sacrificial lambs. Sometimes the big fishes were there. If you look at that processes, you look at it carefully. There were big fishes who were there, who were left off the hook.
I see.
Yes, so some of these things, these are natural things that sometimes, and let us not run away from it. It's a natural thing.
But there cannot be a
because something
than your end.
Something, I'm telling you, if me, for instance, I'm attorney general, you have been with you from Lagos since 1999, and you do something wrong, I would rather prefer that I'll come and sit to you and say, look, this thing that you have done, go and make amends to it.
Thank God you are
if you can amend to it, if you can make amends to it, for instance.
Gary, thank God you are not AG.
No, listen, for instance, if you are SP.
He's talking reality, right?
I'm talking reality.
Well, but
for instance,
that's not reality.
Listen.
I don't think that should be reality.
For instance, if you are SP, And then there's a finding of fact that some monies, for some reason, have gone where it shouldn't have gone. I'll be interested in making sure that all the monies are paid back to the state with interest, rather than pursue to put you in incarceration. Okay? Everybody has his own principle of going about certain things.
Now you can do that lawfully using the SP Act.
Yes.
Because of plea bag.
Yes.
You don't put the person in jail.
Yes.
They pay
the money back to the state with interest.
Right. Okay, so
see?
You want to
so let us see how it goes. But I can assure you that with this youthfulness, and people who are been appointed by now by the president and then the old guys who are there, I think there's a certain blend. You see. So let's give the opportunity.
What do you say about the criticism to the deputy health ministers nominees, Tina Mensah and Mahama Saini? Because people are saying, why? We saw Oko Boy.
Yes.
And you have a ministry that you need people who have some background, and there's nobody there with the background. That's what,
Well, I think that anybody who criticizes any of the appointments is in his own right, free to criticize. I don't think
what
that.
What do you say about that?
I think that what the president probably has done, he is better fit to know the reasons why he appointed person A to be here or person B to be here. He is better sees all the facts to why maybe he didn't reappoint Okoboy to be deputy minister for health. But as a matter of fact, we all know that when Okoboy was deputy minister for health, when this COVID thing was in this crescendo, we all know the work that the gentleman did. But I will not sit here to justify or to say that, his appointment or not, he's not being appointed again is a slur on the people who have been appointed, that they can't do the job. Let's not forget, Napo is not an educationist, but he went to the Ministry of Education and he succeeded. Okay, and now we are lucky that the deputy minister who was then there now is now educationist, being made substantive minister in the ministry. But can we say that because Napo was not an educationist, he didn't succeed at the Ministry of Education? He did. I mean, we all know what he did.
Okay.
So the president, in his wisdom, really knows.
The convex is also true.
Yes.
That the president has assessed the situation and feels that the Educhum is better to head that ministry because he has, that's his area. You see, the Constitution, for example, because the Constitution mandates who should be Attorney General, you can't put somebody who is not Attorney General there, someone who is not a lawyer there.
Right.
Why can't we take that wisdom and ensure that we are putting, the right people in the right places? Okay, so let's continue. You are going to be, as it were, deciding whether they qualify or they don't qualify. What do you say about the list you see?
Well, Samson, first of all, let me associate with earlier pleasantries exchanged and move on to some few temptations that I am unable to resist in Gary's submissions. He subtly made reference to the Muntie 3 and how people in government at the time lined up to sign requesting pardon for the people who were incarcerated. And it reminded me, and that's on a light note, of how Ghanaians from all walks of life only recently went on social media and other platforms to call for mercy to be shown to Polo, Kwapin Polo. And I mean, that is not seen to be wrong. So it makes me wonder if it is just the politics or what people did for the Muntie 3 was wrong.
Where will you leave the society and its principles if there are people who are also human beings and citizens of Ghana who go in for less or who go in for more? Say, my typical example of the woman in my village who is starving and the children are starving and goes to somebody's farm and takes something small just to eat, and she's caught for stealing. She's put into jail for 20 years or more, and her children are sitting there. Nobody goes to cry that she should be released. So where do we leave this country? If people, because of some name or something, we have to go and beg that they should be released.
I agree. I'm just saying that I agree with your observation. I'm just saying that I'm wondering if it is because of the politics in the case of Muntie 3 that people think it was a wrong thing to do, yet they seem comfortable or don't even criticize the fact that same is being done for polo. That's just the point I'm making.
Well, in case of in case of Equafin Polo, we are even told that the Attorney General is in support of it.
Exactly. So,
okay, so let's go.
So that's what I'm saying. For me, some of these things just make me wonder. I mean, what we hold as principles. Gary, let me proceed.
Wait. That point that my brother just raised is an undercut.
Well, but it's true. It's been published in the news that, and it's not. He's not comfortable.
So let's go on. How you are going to assess?
Then the other temptation has to do with the Galamsey fight, because I'm the deputy ranking member on the Lands and Natural Resources. You permit me to just make a comment on it. I mean, I sincerely think that President Akufo-Addo had no reason whatsoever to have failed the people of Ghana in the first term of his government as far as the fight against Galamsey is concerned. I mean, he was not the first president to have started the fight against Galamsey. You recall that his predecessor, President Mahama, with Inus Afuseni and others, waged the fight that led to the arrest of many Chinese citizens who were deported, leading to some kind of diplomatic row between Ghana and China. It did not deter the president and the government at the time. But what that president and that government didn't get was the civil society support and the media support that President Akufo-Addo had. You had civil society organizations dedicating funds and resources to supporting, the fight. Media, came together to form a coalition, dedicated good airtime and resources, sometimes sent their people on the field with their own resources just to ensure that the president succeeded. You recall, unlike the support that he enjoyed, you had issues with people, machines being burnt. Wuntumi was in the news under President Mahama and how his government was chastised for the approach. You recall when he lamented about how some towns, had almost turned into headquarters of Galamsey, and he was bashed for those comments. He didn't enjoy the kind of support, that President Akufo-Addo enjoyed. And so he had no reason, because everybody came to the realization that this was devastating. And so he needed to have been supported to win the fight. It's unfortunate.
It is more accurate, though, to say that President Akufo-Addo rather bought into a media campaign. Because even after they took office, and Amewu appeared before you and was talking about Galamsey, he didn't talk about any campaign.
That's correct.
He was rather talking about a certain rationalization of the process.
I agree that the media had started the campaign before President Akufo-Addo joined. I agree with you.
Because the Ghana Water Company had begun to tell us the stories about the fact that we are going to import water
by 2034, I think. Okay. I agree with you. But what I'm saying is that the platform, the environment was that conducive for him to have won this fight. So it is so disappointing that at the end of the day, I mean, the results that we have is less than appreciate. I mean, it's not appropriate. The results that we have is not what we should have had.
Abu Jinapor says he lost votes, or they lost seats in almost all the mining areas. That tells you his presidency was actually on the line.
Let me tell you, my response to that is, that assessment may be correct, but I disagree that it was as a result of the fight against Galamsey. It was as a result, in my view, of the discrimination in the fight that the people were living witnesses to. And you just pointed to the evidence of how much gold was exported within the time. There's also evidence of how a regional chairman recorded the interministerial committee chair, and in that tape indicated how party needed funds and some of these concessions.
The famous party.
Exactly. It's a party here, Sika. It tells you clearly that there was a scheme. Whilst people who were in that trade, who were not politicians, were banned from engaging in it, they seem to have provided a platform and protection for other people politically aligned to carry on with the trade. And the people were living with that discrimination and unfairness.
Get to the people you are going to vet.
And I'm sure that is why the people rejected Nana Akufo-Addo's candidates in those areas. It wasn't because of the fight. Ghanaian people are that discerning.
That's enough reaction to him.
Anyway,
we go to vet.
Now let's look at the nominees. Really, there's no excitement in town. As far as these, nominees are concerned, there's no excitement. I mean, the only thing that perhaps would have created the excitement would have been the reduction in numbers. But then again, you are right. Now, who caused him? He brought it upon himself. So for me, it is an admission that he was wrong. And all the justifications he gave in the last 4 years, were misplaced. He actually did not need the numbers that he brought upon himself to give us the results that he gave us at the end of the day. I mean, he justified it by saying that the workload was that much, was that huge, and so he needed more hands to bring desirable results. Clearly, I don't think the workload has reduced. Look at the mess that we have in the education sector. I am, first of all, a trained teacher, and I feel very pained, by what is happening in that sector. At the beginning of the introduction of the free SHS, which we all, by the way, support and think it's a good thing that must be done. The only difference is that it must be done well. And we do not think the approach that is being used is a process that will lead to it being done well. At the beginning, I kept, worrying that we were going to have the effect of what I considered a reckless approach to providing what is laudable in 5 or 10 years' time. Unfortunately, it seems the chicken seemed to be coming home earlier than 5 or 10 years. Look, now you have a situation where people who have the awards in secondary school do not even know when their children are going to school. In some cases, children who are supposed to do 3 years, in secondary school, end up going to school for less than 2 months in a year. The last time, only recently, they were asked to report to school, only for parents to prepare their awards. They arrived on campus, only to be told that reopening had been postponed for a month. They had to transport themselves back home. Some of the children who were spoken to complained about how their parents had to even borrow money to prepare them to come, and they did not know how they would return home. We are told again that it has been postponed. The first postponement to a month has led to another postponement. And Samson, you are familiar with Tamasco. At the time that the postponement was happening, I was in the constituency. The school administrators had decided to ask some of the third years who were in school to go home because they did not have space to accommodate those who were, reporting to school. So those third years who were asked to go home after a balloting left campus before the announcement of a postponement, came to their attention. So what it meant was that those who were asked to go home were now supposed to return. I mean, what kind of confusion is this? And so I feel sorry for some of these new appointees who will have to deal with this mess that we have on our hands. And for just mere partisanship, because our favorite or preferred party will look bad, we all seem to be looking on as this deterioration, and confusion is going on. I don't know if it is also maybe as a result of people not being responsible enough, and so just being happy that they do not have to pay fees for their awards. But parents who are very responsible will tell you that they are even spending more, under
what do you say about the Energy Ministry deputies?
I want to move
Mohammed Amin Adam,
I want to
William Oreku, Andre Japamesa. What do you say about that?
I want to move there. Again, I feel sorry for some of them who may be willing to work, may have the capacity, but you just look at the mess again at the energy sector and you wonder what magic they can do within the next couple of days. In the energy sector, Samson, on this platform, I'm sure you have lost count of the number of times, we have spoken about the mess that was going on since 2017, after the previous government had tried to create some stability by fixing the generation capacity that had been a long time problem with our power situation, fixing the financial situation with the introduction of ESLA that had also been a long-term problem, and fixing our gas or fuel problem with the Ghana gas being fast-tracked. I remember those days the president used to call it the game changer, and maybe because of that, young reporters will not even remember problems with WACP. You and I, I'm sure, will remember how almost every year we had to report on interruption of gas supply from WACP. Now, all
West
these
African gas pipeline. And Charles Rekubrobe used to be at the place.
You remember. But you see, because it has been fixed, because it had been fixed, and I'm talking about the financial leg.
We are told that
the generation leg.
If that's what you're talking about, for the power situation, we are told what is happening is not doom so, even though we have been supplied a timetable. So it's being dealt with. So we have seen pictures and footages of the minister
inspecting delayed projects.
Inspecting work that people
delayed projects. That's why I'm saying that the mess had been created. Because you see, if they had continued with the program that they inherited, some of these projects they are now inspecting and using as reasons for the power interruptions that we are experiencing.
Adam, he can assist for this thing to be done. Andrew Ejapamesa, Oreku Edu, they can assist for these things to be tackled. Not so.
I feel sorry for them. I know Andrew Ejapamesa. I know, he's somebody full of energy. I know he has drive. He will want to achieve. I feel sorry for him, given the nature of the problems that he's going to be confronted with. I know Mohamed Amin Anta, and I feel especially sorry for him in his case, because, this is an energy expert. Even before his party came into power, he led the, what's the name of the think tank that he worked with? ASEP. He formed ASEP, led ASEP, in helping government at the time to formulate some of our energy policies. Isn't it sad that his party comes to power and, an agent, Ameo is a fantastic guy, I know also, but he formed ASEP. He got Ameo and Co to work with him. He deputized Ameo, and when Ameo is not even at the ministry, he's still deputizing a new person. That's what I'm saying. I feel that is especially sorry for him.
That's a clear agreement that this is competence.
Is it?
He's going to where he's comfortable.
But why is he not a minister?
You actually want him to be a minister.
Why is he not the minister? Why has he been a deputy all these years?
So that's the point.
What does he lack?
So he's competent.
He should be a minister.
So you are confirming that?
No, I am saying that, I'm saying that even those that I know may have the drive and may have the energy and may have even the competence to work. I feel sorry for them, one, because of the level of mess that has been created in the last 4 years.
Right.
And in Ante's case, I feel sorry for him because he is not even the one who is going to be calling the stakes. And
you those who are going to be vetting these people.
Yeah.
You see, you are doing a job for the whole of the country, and we watch you. When they come to you, what are you going to be saying that because I feel sorry for you, I won't pass you, or what? What are you talking about?
No, we are not discussing what will guide the work of the appointments committee and by extension, my approach as a member of the committee. Definitely, we are guided by the Constitution. We first of all will have to look at whether they are qualified to occupy those positions, whether they have engaged in any illegality over the years. And let me just perhaps caution those who have been CEOs and have had the opportunity to be nominated to look in their cobwebs, because we will look there And if we find skeletons, we will want them to come face to face with those skeletons, before the cameras, and explain to us how they created
Hassan
those
Tampuli,
skeletons in their cupboards. Yes, you have Hassan Tampuli, you have John Kumar, you have Burfi, Ghana Free Zones Board, and a number of them. I think that, and those who also served in the previous government as deputy ministers. I mean, we are going through the handing over notes, and I'm sure that they will have to approach the vetting process with all the seriousness that it deserves. Because members are going to be very thorough.
Just like your own party members have been so appalled and disappointed in you that even candidates that there was overwhelming public outreach, that they were so unqualified, you ended up approving them with such, juicy numbers. People are only hoping that you will not complain this way and then go back in there and still do an approval.
Well, I think that it is quite unfair to put it that way, because if I can perhaps read your mind, I will be excused to say that some of the nominees that you are referring to were those that we referred to the floor as a committee who got numbers that shocked people after we carried out a vote. But it would be unfair, for example, to blame the committee in that case, because the appointments committee, especially the minority members of the appointment committee, in the case of the 3 nominees who were taken to the floor for a vote to be taken on them, were rejected. And it was on the basis of their rejection that they had to be taken to the floor for members to decide on their fate. And so that process was out of the control of appointments committee members.
Interesting.
It was disappointing, yes, that some of them got the
let's get you conclude because your line cut. Can we get you conclude zooming into the area of your profession, the deputy attorney generals? Attorneys General, the 2 of them, nominees.
Yes, Samson. Indeed, it's an honor to have these 2 persons nominated, one of whom was my former classmate, Mr. Tuyayabwa, and the other was my former colleague or one of my staff at the Gimpa Law School, and whom previously happened to be my student, Ms. Dana Asama-Badapa. I think these 2 personalities are likely to bring some value to the position led by the Honorable Godfrey Dame. The 3 of them are all youthful. So the leader and the 2 deputies are all youthful. Mr. Tuyayabwa, I knew as a colleague, as a classmate, and as a student, he was intelligent. So he did what he could as a student, so it was great. As a lawyer, I have practiced together with him, never practiced alongside, but we will post each other a few times in different cases. And Mr. Tuyayabwa, I am very confident will deliver as an Attorney General in support of Mr. Godfrey Dame. Ms. Dana Asama-Badapa has always exhibited leadership skills right from the days of being a student and through the time of working with me as a faculty member at the Gimpa Law School. I think in that particular capacity, her biggest asset is her ability to work under some other person's leadership. So as dean, and she being one of my lecturers, Dana undertook and executed with exemplary comportment every assignment that I gave her. And she has the sterling quality of a leader. She has a firm spirit. She's clearly in charge and in control of whatever she does. I'm very confident that given her age, which really puts her on the brighter side of things in terms of the number of years ahead of her, if she decides to step in the limelight of politics for the rest of her days, she invariably will have some future in that direction. But as Deputy Attorney General, she's invariably been elevated in at a very early time of her life, and she has what it takes to deliver, and I'm very confident in this particular respect. So I am quite happy for the 2 of them, whom I know differently for different purposes, And I'm confident that if they put themselves together as a team under the leadership of Mr. Dame, and Mr. Dame himself will happen to be in school together. He was a year behind me, but we're in school together. So I knew him too well. So the three of them I've had the opportunity of knowing for some long time. And it appears to me that the Attorney General's department is going to be ably manned.
What do you say to those who suggest that once you had appointed an Attorney General this young, like Godfrey Dame, and we're not talking about his professional capacities and abilities, I think there is no doubt, unless you don't want to see and say what is true. I mean, he's just competent. You can't take that away from him. Now, what do you say to those who say once you have appointed somebody who has not sort of done too many years at the bar, like an elderly person, then you are sort of compelled to bring deputies who may be at almost the same level or a little less with him to avoid problems in managing that department. You talk about Authoritative, who has been the president of the bar at the Bron Ahafo region, now divided, showing leadership. Dinah Asunabadapa, who was my mate, was actually one of her chief campaigners at the LLB level for her to become president of the union. And then eventually, coincidentally, she's one of those who drafted me to become the president of the SRC at the Ghana School of Law. You look at where they are, what do you say about that argument, that it was just not good for the president to now look for other people? Because the Attorney General has, over the period, been dominated by people of so many years.
Okay, first of all, so let me say what there is for that argument. And what there is for that argument is simply one of seniority argument. The bar and the legal profession is one that is built on seniority because of the ethics and professional courtesies of the bar. So there's a sense that because the Attorney General is considered the leader of the bar must come with a certain degree of seniority. So that's the only argument, that is the only thing that goes for that argument. Now, there are so many other counters. And the first one to that is the fact that the Attorney General's department is like no other, or the Ministry of Justice and the Attorney General's department is like no other ministry. It is the only ministry where the minister must both be a leader of policy and in addition be a technocrat. All the other ministries, the minister must be a leader of policy and the technocrat is supported by the chief director. So that even though you have the Solicitor General and you have a chief director also at the Ministry of Justice and Attorney General, the Attorney General himself is not just a leader of policy. He is a technocrat. He is a professional who must be in court to defend government cases and defend government interests. Therefore, when it comes to the Attorney General, that person must have seniority is important, and it's important for the purposes of being the leader of the bar. But Godfrey Dame is senior. He's very senior at the bar. If my counting is right, and I'm not sure he'll be happy, probably I should mention this publicly, so probably let me keep that. But he invariably has gone past the standard period for classifying a senior. At the bar, the standard period for classifying a senior is 10 years. So once you hit 10 years and above, you're a senior. And Godfrey Dame is way above the 10 years. So in that respect, he's objectively a senior at the bar and he fully qualifies to be the leader of the bar. So I do not see the difficulty in the issue of seniority at the bar. And you've seen that as Deputy Attorney General, he's invariably commanded the respect of peers, he's commanded the respect of people at the bar. So I am not sure that it really is an issue at the moment. He doesn't have a difficulty with respect at the bar. In terms of his own technical and technocratic competence as a lawyer, again, that is beyond that. So in my opinion, he actually comes with the two key things of leadership at the bar. He comes with the key thing of leadership in policy because he understands how to defend government business, having been Deputy Attorney General for some time. And the two others, Mr. Tuyayeboah is also very senior, as I mentioned earlier, and Dinah Asunabadapa invariably comes with the dynamism of youth and the energy and the leadership qualities that I've mentioned earlier. In addition to that, she's a female, and I think it's imperative that the gender balance is equally recognized.
Okay. Thank you so very much. We take a break. When we return, we are going into the camp of the NDC to ask questions about the issues of reorganization. Some people have suggested that the soul of the party is being wrestled. There's a struggle for the soul of the party. We'll be right back to look at that issue, and then we will zoom in onto the broadcasting bill between censorship and regulation. We'll be right back.
Your national constitution provides for probity and accountability in its preamble. Article 55 requires that every political party in this country must operate along democratic lines, respect in consonance with the constitution and existing laws. When you have this arrangement that has been lifted and put right in the NDC constitution, why can't people ask for accountability? But you see, the question accountability is narrowly interpreted by people to think about finance, profit and loss. That is not it. Political accountability is vertical and horizontal. That you account down to the grassroots and account across.
Accounting for what exactly?
Accounting for your stewardship. And the reason why issues of accountability is being raised, people don't know today what exactly are the collated figures from 2020 elections. I can show you many more. People don't know. You see, this is not the first time that organizational aspects are taking place in the NDC. There was the Obeta Samuel Committee each year. I was a member. We went around this country when we went to opposition in 2000 on reorganization. A report was done. Recommendations were made. I don't know how many of them were implemented. Kam Kwesi Boche's committee, detailed recommendations were made. I don't know how many of them. And holding a party office is one of succession and continuity. People are asking, you are going for another round or a third round of reorganization of the party. Can you tell us what has happened since the Obeta Samuel's reorganization, the Kwesi Boche's recommendations? How many of them have you implemented? For all you know, it is a failure, possible failure, of implementing those recommendations that you find yourself needing to have another reorganization. This is the context.
Suleimana, once again, I start with you. This is Dr. Benjamin Kumbo at a meeting of cadres on the same day at the weekend as the leadership of the NDC were also holding a meeting in the Volta region, whilst the cadres were meeting in Tema. What did he say wrong? Did he make demands that should not be made? And what's wrong? What do you see is wrong with what he had to ask?
Well, Samson, I have been following the conversations and the debates around the NDC's processes of reorganization in the last couple of weeks. And I think that someone like Dr. Ben Kumbo is a very respected person. I think even outside the party, growing up, he was somebody that, even in Parliament, you listen to him, his arguments and all of that. And he's one person that you would be sure that he would make a lot of sense at all times. With particular reference to what has been said, I think people may have legitimate concerns as to why at the time when the party leadership decides that they are holding a forum to do introspection, to look at what went wrong, what went right, then you have other persons within the party also organizing another forum to basically do the same thing in terms of highlighting what the deficits have been and what the challenges are. But I think that as a political party, people need to be tolerant, because politics, I believe, is all about diversity of views and diversity of opinions. It doesn't matter who says what. What is important is the value of what they say and, you know, the weight of what people say. And so I would have been expecting people in the NDC to take in good faith what people like what people like Dr. Ben Kumbo, people like Abu Dhabi, and so on and so forth, have been saying in the last couple of days. However, to look at it holistically, my view is that the NDC has been struggling with leadership crisis over the years. I don't think that leadership is just about electing who is a flag bearer, who is chairman, who is general secretary, and so on and so forth, and just saying that, look, these are our leaders. It is about what these people do that then reflect whether they are leaders or not. And I think that, in my view, the NDC has been lacking that leadership that is required to put the party where it has to be. Yes, they've had former President Mahama lead the party and so on and so forth. But who is it that rallies the party together? Who is it that provides that direction and vision for the party? I think in the early days of the party, people looked up to General Rawlings and whatever vision he had, you know, during the formation, the philosophies of accountability, transparency, probity, and so on and so forth, being a social democratic oriented party, and all of that. Today, as we speak, you talk to a lot of people and they will tell you, look, the NDC says it's a social democratic party. But if you look at between the MPP and the NDC, and the MPP says they are on the other side, but which political party, for example, has been introducing the kinds of things that you would expect from a social-oriented political party? And if it is not the case that the MPP perhaps has been better at that, it's almost at par in terms of social interventions and all of that. So why is it that the party may have lost that whole philosophy that it says it stands for? And I believe that growing up as a child, some of the interventions that the Rawlings-led NDC put in place. And I always say that if you take the North, for example, it was the Rawlings regime that really did a lot of transformation in the North. And it's understandable because if the party says it's a social-oriented political party, it should be a party that stands for those who are struggling, those who don't have or the have-nots, as they say it. But over the years, you know, from Mills to Mahama and till date, as Dr. Kumbo was saying, I know, and I've heard from a lot of NDC leaders who say that in the 2016 election, there was no collation. Nobody really collated the results. And so at the time when Koku Anyidoho was saying that we are in a comfortable lead, there was nothing to show that they were in a lead or were behind. And it is surprising that 2020 elections, given what happened in 2016, the fact that the party, you know, was defeated by close to 1 million votes, the expectation would have been that they would have put their house in order and this time around track and trail and make sure that during the elections, if it's about the collation of the pink sheets, everything is done properly. And by now, the NDC wouldn't just be telling us that, oh, we have it, but they would have been showing it to us. I've been reading a group that says, look, we want the party to show us the collation sheets or their collated figures. If you look at what happened at the Supreme Court, look at that versus what the MPP did in 2012, and you will see a vast difference in terms of preparation, in terms of, you know, assembling materials together and all of that. This time around, there was nothing shown in terms of pink sheets and discrepancies in the calculation, and yet we are told there was, what is it called? Figures were added to some candidates and figures were deducted in some candidates, vote padding, they call it. You know, we only hear people say it. We only read about what people have said, and yet there is no evidence. I have not seen a single, you know, document that says this is from Manchia North or Savelugu or Nantong, where the NDC got this, MPP got that. All that were being shared eventually on social media ended up being fake. So how do we take a party like that serious? And as I keep saying, where is the leadership? I was surprised, for example, what the communications officer of the party did, Sami Jamfi, and the attack, the scathing attack he launched on the Speaker of Parliament and the leadership, and in fact, the entire parliamentary caucus of the party. The question I asked myself is, if this person understands, for example, the role of the Speaker, how do you attack the Speaker for the approval given to the ministers who were nominated? What is the Speaker's role? Or was it the case that because he is a member of the NDC, the expectation was that he should do whatever magic it takes to get the NDC side to disapprove these ministerial nominees? So I think what is happening in the NDC for the last few weeks, and in fact, not the last few weeks, I think over the last years, is a complete show of lack of leadership. And I am not surprised to see what is going on. I can only hope, in the interest of our nation, in the interest of stability, that they are able to put their house in order, mobilize, so that at least we wouldn't end up having a situation of having a one-party state, so that we continue to have, at least if not multi-party, we would have the dual parties being able to compete fairly, and as and when Ghanaians feel one party is disappointed.
You hear Dr. Kumbo say that he believes that John Mahama appears to be the future of the party. However, he should not be projected, and the people should not continue to behave as though they are at the point of selecting a leader and that there is no room for any other leader. The question some have asked is, if that is his belief, that John Mahama is the party's, formidable, candidate going into the future, why should he be worried about what he talks about? That people should not shoot ahead of themselves and not behave as if nobody else should be given the opportunity to contest when the time comes. Why will that be necessary?
Well, first of all, even if Ben Kumbo had said that John Mahama would not be the best candidate, should that be grounds for him to be subjected to the kinds of attacks that he's been subjected to from persons like Edua Sare, who has been an MP before, and therefore you would expect that he understands quite fairly the dynamics in politics. And again, for a party like the NDC that has governed this country, 2 terms, two separate 2 terms, 2000 under Rawlings and then Mills, Mahama. So if you put it together, about 16 years. And it will be surprising for party members to act as though, look, over the years, we have only had somebody who has become vice president and subsequently president. And for us, he is the only person who can lead this party. Again, that will be an admission of a major failure of lack of grooming within the party. And many of us ask, indeed, if you were to say it is not Mahama who should lead the party, who is the other person who has demonstrated that kind of national appeal, leadership qualities, and so on and so forth, that you would say, look, even if Mahama were to be out today, this person is a natural leader for the NDC. I don't see anyone at this stage. And so I think what is happening in terms of the diversity of opinion, in terms of the expressions that Kumbo and others are putting out, should be seen as something in the interest of the party.
Okay,
rather than those who are doing hero worshipping, Muhammad is, and praise singing and all of that. And as Ben Kumbo said, craving for attention by just, praising Mahama and all of that. Perhaps they are the ones who will destroy the party if they are not halted.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I'm being informed that the Herbert Crapper that you suggested was from Oti. May not be from Oti, but rather from Botoku in the North Dai district of the Volta region. So he's not from Oti, according to some information I'm getting here. Yeah, so Oti has not been represented in the government by way of ministerial appointments so far. And then the Ghana Education Services, Sandra Chum tells me that Suini may have made a suggestion that there has been another postponement of SHS3 reopening to the 28th. She says no. any such information going around is not true. The reopening for them is for the 5th of May, and it has not changed. Thank you. Now,
good for the clarification.
Right. So, Sweeney, what is going on? If you listen to Kumbo, why is he coming under such vitriolic attack from the party? And I'll tell you, to be sincere with you, you may have seen me make a post about it, that I am shocked that even persons who are deemed to be matured in the NDC have joined, faceless guys on Facebook to attack him and actually call his PhD into question. I'm shocked that this will happen. That Ben Kumbo, like he said, all of us will admit, it's not only an asset to NDC, it's a national asset. And if you have such a storehouse, intellectual storehouse, powerhouse, who is an elder of your party, and he makes this statement, what's wrong with it?
Well, some of those reactions, I agree with you, have been very irresponsible. Not to justify, but that is how it has always been with all political parties undergoing this phase. You get very senior members, critical thinkers, coming under such barrage of attacks. And like I said, not to justify, but just to state that it is not only restricted.
Why not debate the issue,
NDC,
but insult him? And you have heard him say that he's enjoying the insult. I mean, that's sarcastic.
That's very sad. I mean, I agree with you that Dr. Kumbo is a stalwart, not just for the NDC, but for Ghana. And
perhaps internationally.
It's just a joy listening to him sometimes. The dexterity, the depth, of his arguments and his presentations, just leaves you out. And it's unfortunate that he has to come under such barrage.
So what happens to people? But you see, people. Let me use it this way, maybe for want of better expression. People who may not be qualified to hold his many books that he carries around, insulting him and thinking that is fine. What should happen?
Our politics is made up of all kinds of people. And like I said, I mean, you remember Dr. Wilkubobe and the things that they said about him. We all know his contribution to Ghana. And it happens in the PNC, it happens in the CPP. It is not right. And I'm sure because Dr. Kumbo has lived through it, that is why he's taking it the way he's taking it, in a very sarcastic manner. But you see, Samson, you asked about what is happening. At the risk of being misunderstood, I think that there's the need for many people in the NDC to begin to soberly reflect on what is happening by, first of all, listening to each other to understand each other and not to react to each other. We must be listening to each other to understand each other, because, Samson, I have seen two forces that serve as noise in the communication. And if you study communication, you understand what noise does to communication. It distorts, information. And so I see two forces that are at play, and those forces are serving as noise in the very necessary communication that is taking place, because we need that conversation now. We need that conversation. So first, you have a group of people who are seeking to settle personal scores, or are determined to, attack certain personalities and destroy their image. You have them for whatever reason you cannot explain. And so those who want a genuine conversation, and I believe Dr. Kumbo falls in that category, those who want a genuine conversation that will lead to progress in the party must be wary of the people who are up to no good associating with them. Because there are those people who are using their genuine call for conversation, for such a necessary conversation, to target certain personalities and derogatorily to target them derogatorily and to just tarnish their image for their own personal reasons. So those people who want that genuine conversation to take place must be wary of such people, because in the process, those people affect the message that they seek to, convey by their association with those people. I don't want to mention names, but anybody who has been listening and observing what is going on will know the people I'm talking about, because in the party, they are known. Then that's the first force. Then you have the second force. The second force is also made up of people who seek to hide their inefficiencies and low-level contribution to party progress in the professed love of John Mahama. They seek to hide their inefficiencies and incompetence and very low contribution to party growth in their professed love of John Mahama.
My question is,
you see,
what is
if you do not,
what is happening from the side of leadership? Because if you have, leaders in the party like Ade Koka, regional chairman, if you have Edua Sare, who is speaking all the time, people are listening. If you have this group of people at this level, take on the man, and they are not discussing the issue. They relegate the issue to the background, and they are attacking his person.
So, Samson, don't let us also turn this discussion into discussing those personalities. Let's discuss the issues.
So what should happen to those people?
So the issues are what I am picking out one by one. When you are listening to people contributing to this very necessary conversation, listen to them on the basis of whether or not they want a genuine conversation, or they see the conversation as an opportunity to attack people they have personal scores with, or they are seeking to hide their inefficiencies and incompetence in a so-called professed love for the former flag bearer and former president. We all love President Mahama, and the grassroots continue to call for, his return. It is a decision he, as a person, I know, has not even gotten to even thinking about. But there's a need for the party to be reorganized so that whoever emerges eventually as the flag bearer, be it President Mahama or not, the party would have been put in shape good enough not to repeat the mistakes of either 2016 or 2020. That is why that conversation is necessary. But I'm saying that if we are going to have this conversation, those who want that genuine conversation need to be wary of associating with people who are up to no good, who just see this as an opportunity to, black paint or throw black paint at certain personalities like President Mahama and make him look bad and not qualified to lead. You must be careful of those people associating with you, because they will make people think that you are part of a certain agenda. And you must also be careful with those who have been given leadership roles in the past, either as branch executives or constituency executives or even national executives, but have not been able to contribute what is required for the party to grow, but think the only way they can protect their positions is to say they are fighting for President Mahama, or they are showing their love for President Mahama. You have to listen and understand and distinguish, these two forces who will not contribute to a genuine conversation that will lead to party
on
growth.
The back of what Suhini talks about, that even President Mahama has not yet made that decision. Do you sincerely think that the atmosphere with which you gauge the NDC now, people can dare to say that someone else other than Mahama should be on the NDC's ticket 2024? And shouldn't that be a concern for a party that the Constitution requires or to operate with internal democracy.
Something you could just allow me to so that I'll help Gary. You see, what is happening now, which is even different, and for me, most encouraging, is the fact that for the first time after an election, I think I stand to be corrected, but it's the first time after an election that you have the party undertaking a retreat that was not meant to elect officers. Over the years, that has been the bane of the party reorganization. Most reorganization has been done on, elections. So you have a party conference or congress, and the focus is just to elect officers. Right. But the whole retreat, for example, which was first conducted between members of parliament and party leadership, and then the second one done between national party executives and regional executives with some leadership in parliament, hasn't happened before.
All right.
So for me, it is a new beginning. It is a new way of doing things, and I hope that all those who are concerned about the fortunes of the party will find the appropriate vehicle to contribute ideas that will make the party more attractive.
So Gary, do you say, is it helpful, the current atmosphere that we can all testify to, that leaders within the party are preaching Mahama, and so people may even be scared to want to dare suggest that anybody other than Mahama should be there? Is that helpful to the party?
Something. Politically, it would be naive sitting here to think that if President Mahama is alive, come 2024, NDC will present any candidate other than President Mahama. It will be naive. It will be naive. We know very well that if essentially President Mahama is well, okay, is in good shape, mentally he's okay, NDC will have no other candidate to present 2024 than he himself. Look, let me tell you, the whole Supreme Court petition that was filed was all an attempt to make President Mahama relevant in the political terrain. I listen to Dr. Benjamin Kumbo. What did he say? He said they need some form of evaluation. They need some form of accountability. Okay? Now, he was very clear and very succinct. He said it doesn't mean profit and loss account. They want leadership to account for at least even how the elections even went. When they went to court, they said that they won the elections. Now they went to court, they didn't present their counter numbers to the court to show to that indeed they actually won the elections. What is wrong about what he said? He said, I'm a lawyer. I am saying that if you are going to court and then you say that you have won the election, you must present your counter numbers to the court. What is wrong about what he said?
But he explains that he, as a lawyer and in that stature, he understands the legal strategy for the case.
Yes. But
he's concerned about the many people in the grassroots who are asking them every day, you said you had won, where are the figures?
That is the point. Because, you see, before even the Mama went to court, there was a clarion call in the whole country that he won the elections. And MPs, including my brother Suhini sitting here, they all work from Parliament in a very fit and exercise mode to go to EC, that they won the elections. There were demonstrations across the country that they won the elections. In fact, at a point in time, I said, if they actually won the elections, is there now a dispute between what EC is declaring and what NDC has collected? Now we are even being told that 2016 there was no collation. 2020 there was no collation. Even if there was collation, where is your collected figure? What is wrong about what Dr. Kumbu has said?
The chairman and the director of elections say anybody who suggests they didn't do a collation is wrong. Elvis Efri suggests that on the 8th of December, they had their figures.
So if they had their figures, where were the figures when they went to court? And when they started witness matter, the witness box, and then was asked, what number did you obtain? If you said nobody won, what did you get? And my Lord, we didn't bring our numbers here. You see, if we do a thing like this, and then a figure like Dr. Benjamin Kumbo, a statesman, then he makes these comments and says, look, the grassroots are asking these questions. Because don't forget one thing, a political party is accountable to everybody, including those in the grassroots. Mm-hmm. Because NDC is a grassroots party. They have most of their members all across the country. Mm. So if they are asking, account to us how we fared, account to us your leadership, account to us How you have conducted the affairs of the party, I've been giving the money for the last 4 years, and then you subject the man to barrage of insults. I don't get it. But my brother Junior rightly put it out there. He said people are just being fanatics. We love President John Mahama, and so they will not even subject what the man is saying to any critical analysis, but rather they will just insult the man and run him down. But I don't find anything on what he has said, what the cadres even themselves said. If you look at the cadres statement, they were very clear. They said that, look, let me get what they said.
Dana Budakwi said about the horse with clay feet.
Yes. What have they said wrong? They said they want to provide MPP, okay, with a stiff opposition. Okay, they want a renewal and a reinvigoration of their party to provide opposition that at the end of the day, 2024, they can win the elections. Which party doesn't want to win the elections? Party is put together with a common zeal and a common aim to win general elections. That is what the party is meant for, to change policy. Okay? Now, if cadres are there and they say, well, let us reinvigorate our party. Let's put our party together. Let's make sure that the grassroots, which is now probably going off the stream, people are hijacking the party. Let's make sure that, what is wrong about what the man said? But you see, that is how politics is. Sometimes most people will not subject the message to analysis. What they will do is that they will rather insult, and after insulting you, then everything is clouded. Everything is clouded. But to me, if NDC, they want to go this way, no problem. At the end of the day, Ghanaians are seeing what is going on. It's also the president is focused on doing whatever he's doing.
But there's something we need to also pay attention to. The subculture, if you like, of young people in a party. For me, that's a bigger concern. It does appear that we have a generation that has no respect for elders and superior wisdom. And they can hide under Facebook or whatever it is and insult. But the party must have a responsibility to check that, isn't it?
So I'm saying you are 100% right.
People want to criticize the president.
You see,
and they feel to be effective in criticizing the president is to insult him.
You see, something you are right. And I'm very worried about that kind of trend and that behavior. You know, it started not too long. And you realize that when it started in this country, unfortunately, the people who started those kind of behaviors were rewarded with the ministerial, deputy ministerial positions in this country. Along the line, you will see that those people have reformed their ways. They've departed from that kind of insult to trajectory. They've changed. You see, I don't see why you cannot critique somebody. Something. We have sat here, I've sat on different networks. Have you ever seen me insult President Mahama before?
Not sure.
Yes. Because I can make my point and go.
Even right now, you had said His Excellency President Mahama.
Yes.
I know MPP people who will hate you for even saying President Mahama. They think you shouldn't say president.
Once the president, always a president.
Meanwhile, they are watching CNN every day.
Once the president, always a president.
And they hear for all American president, they call
the president, always a president. We see, let us give respect where it is due.
And some of them will deliberately say Mr. Mahama.
Well,
to say that is to denigrate.
Well, you see, Samson. Let the point make clear.
Right.
The fact that we belong to two different opposing sides doesn't make us enemies.
Okay.
So any sitting here is an NDC, I'm MPP. It doesn't make us enemies.
Right.
It's about different divergent views with a thinking to develop the country through different approaches, through different channels.
Okay, let me bring in.
You understand?
Let me bring in Professor Bochi here. And Professor Bochi, having followed what is happening in the NDC, what sort of sin is it that the cadres, including Dana Budakwi, who said that the NDC is now a huge elephant standing on clay feet. What sin did they commit for asking for accountability among others? And how should they be treated?
Well, Samson, first of all, there are a number of good things that can be done badly sometimes. And I think the challenges of the NDC sometimes are reflected in good intentions that are badly expressed. As sometimes said, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So it does seem to me that there is a general understanding among the rank and file of the party that something ought to change. But it seems the venue and the platform that were used to express those did not necessarily go down well with some members of the party. But in order to understand this, let's put things in context. And I'll just say that the problems of the party, I would divide them into 4 key areas of historical, structural, ideological, and what I call peculiar dynamics. Now, among the historical problems, the formation of the party itself reflects its own dynamic. There are those who think of themselves as the owners of the party, and then they see others as newcomers. There are those who were with the PNDC in the trenches, and the NDC was formed, and they saw themselves as owners of this party, and then some people were latter-day saints, so to speak. That dynamic hasn't left the party. It is still there. And it's reflected sometimes in comments of people who think that others do not have not only the moral wherewithal, but do not have the legitimacy in stakes to argue and speak the way some members or owners of the party or those who see themselves as owners are. So the tension between owners and, new members, those things are there. And then you have the issue of factions. Unfortunately, the NDC has suffered the issue of factions. Once you have some people, claiming allegiance to one faction or the other. So you've had the Mills, the late President Mills, the late President Rawlings, and then the Mahama. So you've had, people who owe allegiances to these personalities, and some are open about them, others are more subtle about them. Factions divide and destroy parties. And so that's a major issue, the issue of factions and allegiances. Then the third issue under historical is the issue of the relationship with the founder prior to his death. The founder, just like in Nkrumah, does no wrong. So today, all the people who have strong allegiances to the CPP will see nothing wrong with ex-President Nkrumah. Founders tend to have a certain messianic attitude about them, as far as the party is concerned. And for these people, anyone who stands against them, that conflict will be resolved in favor of the founder. The NDC continues to experience the difficulty with the relationship with the founder, particularly in the latter days of his years before his untimely death. Then the second one I mentioned earlier was the structural problem. The NDC is a unitary party as opposed to a corporate party. Now, this distinction I make comparing the two parties of the NDC and the NPP. The NDC, which traces its roots, for example, to the CPP was formed by Nkrumah. The NDC itself was formed by Jerry Rawlings, so to speak. It was a party that was founded around Jerry Rawlings, and I think people don't dispute the fact that he's the founder. So it wasn't formed by him, but it was founded around him. The NPP, just as it started in the Dankwa Buzia days of the UGCC, it was formed by a group of peers. And so there was a recognition that nobody really owned the party. Now, these two parties tend to come with different dynamics. If you have a party which is founded around one person or a founder who lived until recently, then the founder's role, the founder's powers, the founder's authority, and people who stand in opposition to the founder, all these dynamics tend to challenge the party and the party's ways of doing things. And so in the case of the NDC, you have the founder's role, you have the Council of Elders, and then you have these various constituencies of people owing allegiances to different people, all creating factional difficulties that the party continues to have to deal with. Then the fourth one I mentioned was the question of ideological. The NDC at the moment, there are some people who think too much is given to the grassroots. There are others who think we are losing our grip of the grassroots, and the party is being hijacked and is hanging in there and is not really linking and connecting to its base. Until you have this addressed, you're going to have a problem, because politics is about numbers. And any constituency lost represents a weakness for the party. And so when you have the grassroots that are disconnected from the party, actual or perceived, when you have some people thinking that the moderates, who are the new members of the party, as it were, giving the party a new coloration, and the party is beginning to lose its way, then you have some of the difficulties and the tendencies that you had recently of having a major meeting going on in Ho, and then you have simultaneously an accountability meeting going on somewhere else. And then, the question of whether it's proper, the timing, whether it undermines the party's viability, whether that can be exploited by an opposing party, all these difficulties come in that have to be dealt with.
Why should there be a problem? Why should there be a problem with that? And Dr. Kumbo says the party is founded on the principles of the Constitution, and if you depart from what the Constitution enjoins a political party to do, then you cannot exist. So it's their fundamental human rights to be able to have the right to express themselves and to association and whatever. He says that they wrote to invite him as cadre, you know, and he chose, he made the decision that he will go to that platform rather than go to Ho, because he was going to Ho as an elder of the council. And there were other elders of the council he believed would even do better than he being there. So he was okay, or they were just going to duplicate themselves. So he decided, let me honor these people. And they had even given me their invitation before you also invited me. So what's the problem? The organizers issued a statement and said, our event chairperson, Keida Danabudakwi, our moderator, Fritz Bafo, and 3 speakers, Kedes Guzitano, Ibi Bright, and Ben Kumbo, were selected not only for their capacity to articulate the current concerns of ordinary party members, but also for their history of work and sacrifice for the NDC, a history which we believe sets them up as role models for young party members. We are extremely grateful to them for the clarity and positivity that they brought to the issues the forum discussed. Our 4th panelist, Keida Hudu Yaya, was unable to participate because of a family tragedy that compelled him to be in Tamale that weekend. Our condolences and solidarity go out to him. What's wrong to make the choice?
Dr. Kumbo is a fine politician. He's a statesman. He's a respectable member of our society, and I think we all know him for who he is. Few can really doubt Dr. Kumbo's good intentions in doing whatever he does. I think the issue, and I suspect that he found himself in a rock, between a rock and a hard place. The problem is not whether or not any meeting can be held. The problem is the timing. The problem is the optics. If you have one meeting demanding accountability, and then you have another meeting doing an introspection into what went wrong and how do we chart a way forward, the two can be synchronized depending on how you look at it.
Exactly.
But also depending on the questions that arose at the accountability meeting, the two can be seen to be in opposition and one not necessarily supporting the other.
Exactly.
I suspect Dr. Kumbo may have found himself in a difficult place when he received the invitation. If he doesn't honor it, it's a rejection of the grassroots of a sort. It creates a sense of rejection of the grassroots. And the grassroots would interpret it as such. If he honors it as he did, it could be interpreted by the other side. I'm talking about by the meeting going on in Ho as having joined a meeting which appears not to be supportive of the public cause that was going on in Ho. So you invariably had a difficulty of timing. If the cadres meeting had come a day before or a day after the whole meeting, this conversation probably wouldn't have taken place.
It may have taken place. This conversation, Professor Bochi, this conversation still may have taken place because the gravamen of their concern is that you don't say the things you guys went to say at that platform in public, particularly because you are elders. You must talk in the closet.
That's correct. That's correct. But I'm just saying the gravity of the conversation in terms of the clash, in terms of the timing, in terms of the symbolism, that actually has even overshadowed the actual questions. Because the actual questions, like you said, if I want to tell you something I'm not happy with you about, I can choose to call you out publicly, which would be to embarrass you, or I can choose to do it privately, quietly somewhere, which would be to focus on what you've done I'm not happy about. And that's why I indicated that the optics and the symbolism and the character of the questions that came there obviously were those that people are challenging. But the last point I was making about the peculiar dynamics of the NDC, which also is one of its challenges, is the fact that the NDC is the only party with a former president who was a candidate in an election that they lost recently. And it's the only party with a former president who is still in the running, who qualifies, is eligible, and therefore potentially may. The ambition of running again, this leverage is a threat. The leverage of being a former president with the capacity to stand again, with the influence that he exerts, with the prospect of marketing, and with all the other dynamics that makes him a front runner. For those who want to stand, that is a threat. And
particularly the dynamic, Professor Bochi, particularly the dynamic that those who claim they have a horse standing or an elephant standing on a clay feet are wrong, because he led a campaign that has given us a parliament we have not had before.
Exactly.
Right. It depends on where you stand. That would determine whether you consider your soil clay or otherwise. And the point I'm making is, for those who feel the prospect of standing again, his leverage for threats, and that leverage for them would represent, in their opinion, a clay soil, because they've estimated that the recent election was lost. But you brought in a different dynamic, that indeed, even though he lost the election, the parliament that we have at the moment is unprecedented in the annals of Ghana's history. The most important point is this. One can look at the pros and cons of his candidature, but the most important characteristic feature of all that's happening now is that they represent early salvos of 2024. A lot of these things that are happening today, people just can't declare them openly, but people are making projections into 2024, and they are throwing salvos with a view to seeing the extent to which they can demoralize the side against which those salvos are thrown. And I think it's important for us to remember this. But the last point I just want to make before I end here is that conflicts, as someone mentioned earlier, one of the panelists mentioned earlier, is inevitable in politics. What is not inevitable is explosive conflicts. The NPP has gone through this before. Some people actually even lost their membership of the NPP, but the party stood. Disunity is the stuff of which defeat is made in politics. And so if you handle your conflict publicly, as it's ongoing at the moment, and if the conflict appears vituperative and is going out of control, there's a danger that some of these factions or the perceived factions may become perpetualized. And if that happens, you have a real problem in terms of how you're shot at political power. So I think it's imperative the NDC tries to resolve a lot of their conflicts, particularly quietly, so that the media doesn't get played out in the media domain.
Right. And yes, we can terminate this discussion here, but let me bring in briefly, and I'm going to come to all of you for just a minute to tell me what you think about the NDC's decision to boycott the IPAC meeting organized by the Electoral Commission. But Professor Bochi, I wanted you to address the issue of the subculture of attacking personalities, even by younger people, and the expression I used earlier, I said, for want of a better expression, I meant it. People who are not even qualified to carry the man's books, so to speak, are questioning his PhD. What can be done about that?
So we've lost decorum, not only in our politics, but in our public square generally. We've lost decorum in our public space, and there is no sense of civility and deference. There is no sense of respect and comportment. People have lost their sense. If you belong to WhatsApp groups, you can tell the extent to which people basically just have no sense of civility and have no sense of maturity. And sometimes you just don't engage because you basically just think that these people are not to your, they are dragging you to the mat. You just don't want to play according to that rule. So we've lost our sense of public comportment. And it's in that light that I see what's happening today. There's no sense of respect. Now, something happened. I'm sure you remember this. We all saw it on CNN. Something happened sometime in the US when somebody called the former President Barack Obama by a certain name. And very quickly, the late Senator McCain, who was then standing for the candidature of the Republican Party, very quickly just seized the microphone and rejected that insult or that lack of respect for the former president, and basically restored integrity, restored civility, and restored maturity, and insisted that he was not going to be a part of that conversation. We need that. We need people. We need people in whose defense bad things are said to publicly say we reject this. This is not who we are. This is not the level of our immaturity. This is not our sense of culture and comportment, and I reject this.
Right.
I support the position in terms of the content, but I reject how it was articulated.
And this is happening. This is happening in the parties. This is happening in the parties, and in the parties, the young people feel it is normal because the elderly are also doing the same. And this is a danger that I think all of us must be concerned. You have Gary here, and you listen to the way Gary spoke. You know, spoke like a nation promoting patriots, irrespective of the fact that they disagree here on this table. He is not, you know, insulting or seeking to take advantage of that to attack anybody. All right, so now let me end with this, just 1 minute. Tell me, what do you make of the NDC boycotting the IPAC meeting to review the 2020 elections? Yes, Professor Abochi, start with you.
Yes. Right. Okay. Unfortunately, I think it's regrettable, if you ask me. I think the party is still going through the pains and the disappointments of the loss, and ultimately the loss of the electoral petition in the Supreme Court. I suspect it seems the party is still going through that, which is not unusual. It's not unusual for parties having gone through some loss, you know, whether they agree with the loss or otherwise, having gone through some loss, for the party not to accept the post-electoral processes. And indeed, this is not the first time. The NDC is not the first party to do this. The MPP has boycotted so many things in the past when they were not happy with certain decisions of the Electoral Commission, or they were not happy with certain electoral outcomes all the way from the 90s, maybe to now. So it's important that we put this in context. It's not the NDC's doing per se. But from the standpoint of someone who is in constitutional law, from the standpoint of constitutional law, we've lost the quality of the feedback is important. The stakeholders' critical input and feedback is important for us to be able to ensure that the next level of the electoral process, benefits from these and is of a much more qualitative level than currently what we have. So their failure to participate or their refusal to participate deprives the process of that level of quality that otherwise I would have wished for. Okay. But it also means that the Electoral Commission must begin also, must also do some introspection on how it engages the parties post-elections, because every election will come with some loss. So how do we deal with parties who lose elections and ensure that somehow we're able to close ranks and come together so that they can deal with these processes instead of the division?
Now, Suleimana, let's hear you on this. The NDC's, one of the deputy secretaries, Otokuno, Peter Buama Otokuno, says that the NDC has thoroughly examined the dubious role the Jean Mensah-led Electoral Commission played in the rigging of the 2020 general elections. Moving forward, the party shall review its working relationship with the electoral management body and take appropriate steps to forestall the rigging of any future elections in the country. This is where he began and said they don't think that they are needed at that IPAC meeting, and they are not going because this Electoral Commission has been working against it.
Well, Samson, to start from where Otukuno, what he said, I think if we are to take that statement, it reaffirms my position that perhaps the party could do better. Because if, as a political party that has contested elections since 1992, under different leadership of the Electoral Commission, and today we are being told that the EC rigged the elections and that the party is going to take steps to ensure that such things are forestalled in the future. The understanding one gets is that the party could have taken certain steps to forestall whatever they say had happened in the last election. So the question then is, why didn't they take it? Is it that 2012, 2016, 2020, they still couldn't know what to do? But on the IPAC, yes, I can understand that the party may still be very angry. We, those sitting, on the fence or outside, really don't know what they know, except that they keep telling us that they have figures that suggest that they won and their victory was declared for another party. I think that it is important, as I said earlier, that the party comes out with whatever they have, so that if it turns out to be the reality, we would all endorse this. I think that we all want a united country. We want elections that are credible. I think the Electoral Commission, in the management of the last election, certainly there were issues. Those of us in civil society felt that previous ECs, if I may put it that way, engaged more, engaged better. IPAC, was much more stronger. Under the current leadership, we heard about, IPAC decisions having to be voted on as against previously, when IPAC decisions was really about consensus, arriving at consensus, and so on and so forth. So absolutely there were challenges with the management of the last elections. And I believe that as stakeholders, and of course political parties are the number one stakeholders in the electoral process. I think that as stakeholders, if a problem has been identified with the electoral management body, with the institution that is charged with managing our elections, the approach to use is to go through the relevant mechanisms to reform and strengthen that institution, rather than saying because you are frustrated with whatever they did, you are taking actions that would further undermine that institution.
Thank you, Sulemana.
If you have a by-election today, it is a single EC that is going to manage it. Would the NDC say because they are not happy with it, they wouldn't put up a candidate?
Thank you, Sulemana. And let me come to Suhini now. Otokuno says, it is the considered view of the NDC that the current leadership of the Electoral Commission, who supervised the manipulation of the 2020 general elections and the stolen verdict that resulted from same, lacked the integrity, credibility, and impartiality to lead any such discussions or review of the very elections they rigged.
Yeah, Samson, if you permit me, I will make some few remarks.
Sorry, what I just said is actually Johnson Dunketia, who issued a statement and said that.
Yes. You see, earlier when I spoke about what was happening in the NDC, I talked about the forces, the different forces that seem to be creating noise and making it difficult for us to understand each other. And in subsequent submissions, especially in the submission of Professor Abochi, which I largely agree with, you will notice that it is made to seem like the platform that was created for the cadres was on behalf of the grassroots. But it will also seem, if you watch our party platforms, from the constituencies to the branch, that it is the same grassroots that seem to be misunderstanding some of the things that were done on that platform, especially because of the associations I spoke of. So if you associate with the wrong people, your message will be clouded and misunderstood and will result in attacks that you should not have been subjected to. So that is why it is important.
Abu Dhabi, Kumbuadens associated with the wrong people?
No, I'm not. You see, clearly, like I said, I didn't want to mention names. And from my earlier submission, I've said that those people who want that genuine conversation to take place, that will lead to the party growth, must be wary of associating, either using people who are projecting what they are doing or spokespersons or even organizing platforms. They must be wary of those who have ulterior motives and who are bent on sabotaging and denigrating certain people in the party. They must be wary of associating with them.
Boycott.
Just as we must also be wary of those who want to hide their inefficiencies under the guise of loving President
to the boycott. 1 minute.
Because
how long will
I want to disappoint you, please, if you indulge me.
We have very little time.
If you indulge me,
we have a very important issue to
I know. I am disappointed that we are having less than an hour to deal with that subject because I'm very passionate about it. But it's also important that I repeat the point that you made about the fact that the NDC's showing in the 2020 general elections has been the best so far, I think, that any political party has, done after losing an election and going into the second election. It's the best so far.
The boycott.
So it is going to be very difficult for anybody to suggest that we didn't do things that well. We can always improve as a party, and that is why the conversation must lead towards the growth of the party.
Strictly some 30 seconds.
Now,
how long will this boycott be?
On the boycott, I agree with the General Secretary of the party when he says that it is quite ironic for the NDC to sit around the table with a group of people that we have totally lost confidence in, a group of people we believe deliberately, manipulated or facilitated the manipulation.
The evidence of which you are not showing.
The general election.
The evidence of which you are not showing.
That is also
the evidence of which you won't even show in the courtroom.
See, again, and it's because we do not have time. You see, there is a difference between the court case and the processes of 2013 petition and the 2020. So if you are doing that comparison, sometimes you get it wrong. The NDC went to court in 2020 seeking different things and working also under different guidelines. So you cannot expect them to do the same things that the MPP did in 2013.
Eventually, you have to go to the Eventually, you have to go to the IPAC.
I mean, as a party, obviously, we will focus on making sure that we get some electoral reforms, being done or carried out before the next election. So, however we will do that, when we are done with the internal conversations, that will lead to the strengthening of the party. We will adopt an approach that will lead to the necessary reforms that will make it impossible for even Nana Akufo-Addo to rig an election for himself if he is the electoral commissioner, or to rig for Dr. Baumia.
Thank you. And here we are, an election that's been manipulated, is being rigged, is an election that you had your best ever. That's what you just said.
That is the irony. Okay, that is the irony.
What do you think about the boycott?
That is the irony. You see, my brother Suhini is made it very clear that this is their best election so far.
Our best showing so far.
Yes, to the extent
not just the NDC.
Yes, to the extent that this is the first time
performed that well.
This is the first time
in the second round.
Wait a minute. This is the first time we have had MPs being at par 137 with one independent. It tells you how the election was close. Now you are being told that the election was rigged in favor of
rigged in favor of
who?
Could have been better.
If it was rigged, how did you get 137
Our performance could have been better if it were not rigged.
So let me make the point very clear. The election was not rigged. This election was fought. This election was conducted by the EC in a fair, transparent manner. Nobody came, even in the petition, to come and tell the court that you were not allowed to vote. Nobody came in the petition that you were not allowed to do vote counting, that there was no declaration. Okay, even in Techiman South, that they said there was no declaration to Techiman South. Now they went there to inspect pin sheets and collation papers. Techiman South, just a few days ago. Okay, so sometimes let's be very fair to our listeners. This election that we are going into, it is painful to lose elections.
They're isolated issues. Anything is possible, particularly when you are producing. You are the one in charge of producing documents, particularly to a court. You can do anything with the documents and present whatever it is. You cannot avoid also the fact that we are talking about situations where we say isolated, but unprecedented. That 4 or 5 lives have been lost. So that's not.
Well, if you are talking about the Miley, the unfortunate incident about people being hurt
what led to them? That's the question.
That is an issue for police to investigate and come and tell us why, in a mere counting and collation, people could even go and and lose their lives. That's a matter for another discussion. It's a criminal matter that the police must deal with it. But you cannot say that the election was rigged. The election was fought. It was free, fair, transparent. The EU report has come out, and you have read the report. It was fought free and fair. So what I think NDC, it's painful to lose elections. You see, but when you lose elections, even court case, when you lose, it's also painful. But you see, if you go to court without any evidence, the court cannot help you.
Okay.
The court cannot help you. Okay. NDC, if you are saying that you are going to boycott this IPAC meeting or whatever it is, I think it's unfortunate. I think you reconsider and go there, make your case to improve the electoral system, so that by and large, we all know that IPAC is an avenue for electoral system improvement in this country. So please, I will urge all of you to go there, to make a case before the J-Mensa, because if not, you are going to tell us that then you will not take part in the election again. Because there's the same body that will conduct the election 2024.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Thank you very much. And I think we must admit right at this point that in the scale of things, maybe the next topic may be even the most important that we have to discuss. Therefore, we must prepare and plan well to return to this table with Suhini, with Sulemana, Prosabochi, and Kojo Ponkroma to deal with that subject matter of the broadcasting bill. I read a few messages and then we take a break. Saint says that I can't believe myself, but that I am agreeing with Suhini, but that is the case. I agree with him that we have messed up the education sector. I, however, believe in the ability of the minister to turn things around. I hope I'm not proving wrong.
He wants pictures.
Like in the Galamsey situation. Baba Chairman in Tamale says that the president has been so magnanimous by giving young people the opportunity to serve our beloved country, Ghana. It is my hope that these people will eschew arrogance in their call to duty. Congratulations to Fatima Abubakar. Ransford Akoto says, who does the ministry grant licenses for prospecting in the forest reserves in the first place? If they do not intend to grant a license for mining, if it is a forest reserve, such activity should not be permitted. We'll be right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile we put Ghana first. And the messages I was reading to you, let me finish with that and then we will continue. This was Ransford Akoto, and he says, who does the ministry grant licenses for prospecting in the forest reserves in the first place? If they do not intend to grant a license for mining, okay, if it is a forest reserve, such activity should not be permitted. Brian Brown says, Mr. Nimako is trying to assure us that the current minister, Mr. Jinapo, will do something better, but he shouldn't forget that it is with this same vibrancy that Mr. Amewu started the fight. But still, here we are. Babamu in Tamale says, congratulations to all deputy minister designates. Anyway, better luck to the rest of the persons who couldn't make it, but the appointees of the president should remember we have 4 years to govern. 4 years to govern. Then Man Friday, is that your name? Says that the hard truth is that Ghana might not see any rapid development just as it has been. Nothing seems to change no matter who is appointed. The problems are still the same as before. Eliasu in Tamale says the deputy minister nominees must live up to expectation by justifying their inclusion. They must adopt an open door policy to those whose efforts brought them to that elevation. That's a party person talking. Open door so that they can reach you. They must be mindful of the elections ahead of us by making the president proud. Kweku Abeku says, I think you are going through the normal misunderstanding that parties experience when they lose elections. I think NDC is going through the normal misunderstanding. Abdallah Redwan says, in politics, like religion, power lay in certainty. And that one man's certainty always threatened another. I'm not sure I get that. Einstein, Adwin Nyansa says, intra-party politics is a lot more acrimonious than inter-party politics. It's always unwise to seek to make political capital out of one party's internal issues. Jama Woyale. Okay, in Boku, you says that the Galamsey menace got worse simply because of the NPP mentality of party Hiensika. we should cut the pretense and speak truth to power. And finally, Muhammad Sita, you say, if a political party is able to groom young men to insult its opponents, where else do you want to look if you want the source of that behavior? I think there is a disconnect between the party's elders and the functional executives of the party. And there are many of you who are concerned that we shouldn't be discussing NDC party issues because it is your private matter. A political party is not a private entity. According to the laws of Ghana, it's a public entity. Right, thank you. This show is brought to you by Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN everywhere you go. Ashasi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Waylead Properties, home is where one starts from. Heaven mosquito spray and coil, pleasant on humans, tough nightmare on insects. And Napa Foods, it is tasty. DBS Industries, we truly are your roof experts. Robert & Sons Limited Optical Services, your comprehensive eye care services provider. Right, so let me begin with Suleimana once again. We don't have Kojo Nkrumah joining us yet. Do we have him now? Okay, so Suleimana, the issue about bringing in the broadcasting bill, what's the need? Why are we here now? The broadcasting bill, after all, has been in the works for almost a decade or more now. Why are we now bringing it back?
Well, Samson, I think it's something that we have always needed. It's something that ought to have been in place long ago. I know we don't have much time, and I will try to be as quick as possible with my submission.
Yeah.
But, you know, when the Constitution came into force on January 7, 1993, it was about 2 or 3 months after, there was a conference convened at Gimpa, and this was a national conference on independent broadcasting. And then Professor P.A.B. Ansan, Professor Kwame Kakari, and other stalwarts in the industry, you know, brought together people of diverse backgrounds, including lawyers and engineers and so on and so forth, to deliberate what we do. And if you look at the proceedings from that conference, the late Justice T.K. Afre, for example, writing about how do we regulate the industry, makes the point that, well, we are coming from a culture of silence, and therefore it is understandable that the framers of the Constitution would provide that kind of space for media freedom. However, it is important that we regulate the industry in order to avoid what he called chaos. And in so, he recommended that the NMC and Parliament had a responsibility to ensure that what the Constitution requires of all of us under Article 164 is immediately responded to. And as you know, that article talks about the fact that we need to make the appropriate legislation in order to address concerns about public morality, public order, the rights of other persons, and so on and so forth. Now, 28 years on, nothing was really done, except, you know, having the draft in place and then doing all the back and forth and so on and so forth. I've heard from credible and authoritative people saying that, look, the broadcasting bill got stuck because industry players, particularly GABA, had concerns about certain provisions, and so they really fought against its passage. Now, we've come to a point where we realize that perhaps we would have, our collective interest would have been served if we had the broadcasting bill in place, or a law to regulate the broadcast space in place. And I believe that if anything at all, the incident in Kaswa may have triggered our energies and gotten all of us to suddenly realize that we cannot wait anymore to have a law to regulate the broadcasting space. We started off with just 1 or 2 stations. We are talking now about over 450 radio stations, more than 100 television channels, and we know about dozens that are broadcasting on the internet and so on and so forth. And it is really surprising if you think of it that all these things were happening without a legislation in place. And if you look at the ruling of Justice Benin in the Giba versus Attorney General and NMC, even as the Supreme Court took the view that what the NMC wanted to do was at variance with the Constitution, particularly the guarantees around media freedom and no censorship and so on and so forth, they make it emphatic that the framers of the Constitution did not contemplate a transition from the culture of silence to a culture of media impunity. And they make the point that if we were to allow media impunity to thrive, the results will be chaos, the results will be disorder. And I have always said or held a view that an unregulated media space that allows for anything to go is perhaps the most dangerous thing for our press freedom. So in order for us to preserve the freedoms that the Constitution guarantees for us, the right thing that we must do is to have a legislation in place, except to add that whatever legislation that we decide to put in place must be one that does not in any way attempt to take away part or in full the freedoms that are guaranteed for our media to practice and to thrive. I don't know of any democratic, serious democracy where, because the media must be free, there's no regulation. If you go to the UK, and those of you who are lawyers, you often say we practice common law. And I believe that the origins of common law perhaps is the UK. The UK, the Ofcom, which is the media regulator, is perhaps one of the strongest media regulators in the world. And they make sure that every media organizations are taken on. And sometimes heavy sanctions are imposed. So we are at a time when we cannot just allow the media industry to operate without any regulation. And reference to the Constitution talks about freedoms, which we have ensured. But where it talks about having appropriate legislation in order to deal with the freedoms and make sure that we have order and avoid chaos, then we say because of freedoms, we are not responding to it. I think it is time for us to deal with Article 164 and empower the National Media Commission to do what it has to do, which it has not been doing over the years.
Would you not agree that you, as in Giba, the GJA, and media watchdogs like you may have failed, and that is why you seem to believe that this is important and this is what we ought to have? I'm sure you are familiar with Freedom House, international media watchdog, and it did, some assessment and clearly says, let me read to you, that self-regulation as an alternative to statutory regulation is acknowledged as the best practice model and is already used in dozens of countries, particularly those with freer media environments. In a self-regulatory system, the media industry essentially polices itself through bodies such as non-governmental media council or an ombudsman, which monitor compliance with agreed upon code of conduct. Most self-regulatory bodies apply to the print media, but in some countries, there are separate entities for broadcast media. Councils that cover all forms of media are less common, but given the growth of media houses that encompass print, broadcast, and internet outlet, this all media format may expand in future. So is there not a failure in this direction that you should have led these processes for a self-regulatory process rather than a state regulatory process?
Well, Samson, quickly, yes, I know Freedom House. In fact, for a number of years, I was one of their reviewers for their Global Freedom of the Press Index. Now, the point they make is valid, but somehow misleading. So where we have self-regulatory mechanisms, it does not mean that statutory regulations shouldn't exist. So if you take a country like Benin, they have a very efficient self-regulatory body called ODEM. And ODEM is actually supported by even the state to ensure that the media itself regulate, among themselves. But that does not mean that the country does not have an overarching law such that when the self-regulatory mechanism fails, then the statutory regulation will be triggered. It is the same if you go to Cote d'Ivoire. It's the same in Niger. But I should say that among the Francophone countries in West Africa, we have strong self-regulatory mechanisms. But at the same time, the statutory bodies exist, which can crack the whip when it has to do that. Freedom House is based in the US. In the US, it has a statutory media regulatory body, even though they talk about, all the freedoms that are in place. So you cannot say that in the US, it is free for all, anything goes. There is regulation in place. If you go to the UK, as I said, the Ofcom exists, one of the strongest. Yes, there are self-regulatory mechanisms, but at the same time, statutory regulation is very important. So we could have done better in terms of self-regulation in Ghana. But even if we were doing better, I think that it is still critical that we have a statutory regulation that would empower bodies like the National Media Commission to be able to act where self-regulation appears to be failing.
Interesting. Let me bring in Professor Abochi here. And the same, as it were, Media Watchdog internationally suggests that legislation establishing an official regulatory body would ideally ensure its independence from the political branches of government, political parties, and economic interests. This means insulating the regulator from improper influence over its membership, appointments, financing, and decision-making process. However, these laws can also be crafted in a way that both limits the regulatory body's autonomy from the outset and grants it such authority that the government can use it to ensure official control over important parts of the media landscape. Is it not the fear? And we live in the part of the world and in a country where we know that when these things are done, the people who are appointed, the manner of appointment, they behove to the political, elite, and therefore it becomes difficult to have an independent, impartial process. Isn't that the fear?
Any executive body that is established will invariably spark that fear. Ours is a history of censorship. We've come from an era when the executive authority of state basically predetermined what was going to be published. Having moved away from that, but really not having moved away in some ways, there is always the fear that an executive authority, an agency of state that is given the mandate will invariably be subject to manipulations by the executive authority. So that fear cannot be wished away, and unfortunately, I'm not sure how we can go around that. Ideally, the National Media Commission could have been structured, could have been in some ways encouraged to do this. And I think the Media Commission sometimes appears to constrict its own authority. It doesn't seem to take, what I would consider its appropriate authority. It rather interprets its powers in a very narrow way and in some ways constricts its own authority. I think that the Constitution gives the Media Commission, well, not I think, it's the reality. The Constitution gives the Media Commission the authority to set standards. There is nothing broader than that authority. Certain standards require that you put in place mechanisms that weeds away things that violate those standards. So the Media Commission has an invariable authority, which in my opinion, they have somehow, rather self-narrowed their own authority in terms of how they exercise that power, and that remains a problem. But it's imperative for us to also put this in context and to recognize the fact that the standard-setting authority of the National Media Commission, when exercised, can be a bit more acceptable in terms of broad-based acceptance. And I say this because the Media Commission has done well, fairly done well, since its establishment to insulate itself from political accusations. So generally, the Media Commission has played that non-partisan regulatory role. And my thinking is, if it's empowered, it can actually play this role effectively and easily without the accusation that comes with an executive agency being under the control of the executive authority. But I'll quickly just hasten to make the point about the decision affecting the the Giba case.
Yeah.
Look, the truth of the matter is this: in the absence of guidelines, in the absence of a clear, detailed, and rational criteria for pre-evaluating content, in the absence of a clear statement of these, the Supreme Court will arrive at the decision it arrived at. And the reason this is because the Supreme Court, clearly mindful of the history of censorship and mindful of the Constitution's prohibition of censorship, any pre-evaluation of content which is not accompanied by clear objective criteria of how the allowances and disallowances of content will be gone about, of how the prohibition or otherwise will be gone about, and leaves a lot of these in the spectrum or realm of speculation, in the spectrum or realm of discretionary authority, the Supreme Court will strike the legislation down, and that will be absolutely correct. And the reason that is correct is because the Supreme Court's position or concern will be that a pre-evaluation of content which is not accompanied by a predetermined standard for doing that, so that there's no fear of interferences, as you mentioned, so that there's no fear of biases, and there's no fear of arbitrariness from time to time, then you are clearly in the realm of censorship, which is prohibited. So we can have this done again and properly done, but the prohibition or the allowances or disallowances of content must be clearly spelled out. Virtually nothing will be left to discretion, so that when a content is allowed or disallowed, everyone knows that the standard criteria for doing that has been respected, and you can verify in case you have complaints. And of course, it must also be hinged on some appeal or appellate system, so that if someone disagrees with the decision, what are the appellate systems and how do we go about these things? So there's a way of doing it, and I think the way was gone about.
So like I mentioned earlier, we will definitely need a proper platform dedicated to this subject matter. But let me have Suini also come in, and I have no better reference than Freedom House. So let me read one portion of Freedom House's work that they have done in a number of countries, including African countries. And they say that most countries, including democratic states, have traditionally featured significant regulation of private broadcast outlets, typically including licensing and frequency allocation by an official regulatory body. Ideally, an independent, non-partisan entity adjudicates requests for licenses. We don't have that in our country. An independent, non-partisan entity adjudicates requests for the licenses and spectrum according to a clearly defined legal process and in a transparent and unbiased manner, so that media diversity is not compromised. Regulatory bodies following this model are common in North America, Western Europe, as well as in a number of other democratic settings. For example, in Mali, while the law requires broadcasters to be licensed in order to receive a frequency and operate, the rules are straightforward, bureaucratic procedures, and financial hurdles are minimal, and the regulatory body in charge functions independently.
Well, Samson, I agree with you that we will need some more time to have a proper discussion of this topic. And I also agree with you that there's no better reference than Freedom House. They have done extensive work over the years on media freedoms across the world. I do not know the particular report that you are referring to, but one that I have also come to fall in love is a 2011 report that was entitled License to Censor.
That's the one I'm referring to.
Yeah, the use of regulation to, restrict media freedoms. I mean, a beautiful, piece that can guide our understanding of this topic. Now, in the opening of this report, it also highlights the fact that over the years, governments have used brute force and hostile approaches to stifling media freedoms. But because of international condemnation, strong international condemnation, governments all over the world, including democratic governments, are beginning to use a subtle means of still regulating media. And you realize that there have been concerns in this country, especially relating to media freedoms and the fear that we may just be going back to the culture of silence. I have always said that a better appreciation of this report will give you a better understanding of the concerns as they relate to Ghana and the subtle, you know, chipping away of media freedoms as I see them. But if you recall, when the information minister appeared before the appointments committee, that was an issue I raised with him, the need for us to get the broadcasting bill passed. Because really, I fail to understand why all these years we have not been able to get it passed. I looked at the memorandum, for example, that accompanied the 2014 bill that came to Parliament. And clearly, there is an identification of the fact that all over the world, I mean, international best practice is that you use program content, you know, as criterion for authorization, which is unfortunately missing in almost all the different pieces of legislation that we have governing broadcasting in this country. Now, you just made reference to a license regime in a country, Mali. In Ghana, fortunately for us, under Chapter 12, clearly you do not require a license to practice. But under 164, there's something interesting. You are the lawyers, and for me, I think that it's important that we all avert our minds to that provision and see whether what is currently happening cannot be addressed, and the fear of us going back to the culture of silence also addressed if we have, you know, a broad consensus on the passage of a broadcasting bill that will give clear guidelines as to how the media should operate. Now, 164 says the provisions of Articles 162 and 163 of this Constitution are subject to laws that are reasonably required in the interest of national security, public order, public morality, and for the purpose of protecting the reputations, rights, and freedoms of other persons. Now, it clearly identifies the nature of the laws. In my view, that's my understanding of it. The law that should govern even media practice should come in this form. It should be about a threat to national security. It should be about public order.
But even those matters, yes, the experts will tell you in this area will tell you that these kind of, they are sort of vague provisions about public morality and the rest of them. And you normally give the regulator such wide it gives the regulator such wide discretion that it can abuse. And therefore, if there has to be regulation, you have to watch these things. As we all agree, we have run out of time. Unfortunately. I'm told that the information minister has joined us. Unfortunately, our time is up. So what we'll do is that you guys go back, refresh on the bill itself. And when we take the bill, I'll invite you to look at from sections 20 up to about 70, 80 thereabout. Then we can pay attention and discuss all of that. Thank you very much. This is where we draw the curtains on Newsfile. Hopefully, at another date, we'll be able to discuss this matter thoroughly. And our apologies to the Minister, Kojo Nkrumah. I understand he just joined us, but our time is up. Have a good afternoon.